Can you imagine a situation where someone misunderstood the meaning of a single word, and as a result, more than 150,000 people died? One word. History has recorded such a case for us, and now I will tell you this story. The summer of 1945 was draining the last resources from the warring countries. By this time, Germany had already capitulated to the Allies, but the World War was still ongoing. Individual skirmishes were occurring in European countries, in Czechoslovakia, in northern Slovenia, in Latvia, on the Greek island of Crete, and in a few other places. But all this was sparks smoldering after the Great Fire. Meanwhile, in the Pacific theater of operations, the conflict was raging intensely. American forces, supported by the Australian Navy and the Mexican Air Force, were actively liberating the Philippines from Japanese occupation. The Australian First Corps, supported by allies, fought the Japanese for Borneo Island, which belonged to Britain and Netherlands. British, American and Chinese forces reclaimed Burma, also from the Japanese. Chinese troops counterattacked Japanese forces in western Hunan. By that time, Japan was the only Axis state still actively resisting despite its dire situation. The US Air Force conducted massive bombings of strategic cities from the air, while a naval blockade using submarines was strangling Japan's economy. In February 1945, Prince Fumimaro Konoe informed Emperor Hirohito that defeat was inevitable and urged him to abdicate. Nevertheless, it was Japan that was the main problem for the Allies. Against the backdrop of all this, in July 1945, the leaders of the Big Three, Truman, Stalin and Churchill, along with Attlee, met in the recently recaptured German city of Potsdam to discuss what the post-war world would look like. The conference lasted 2 weeks, and closer to its end, on July 26, the proclamation defining terms for Japanese surrender was published, which stated: "We call upon the government of Japan to proclaim now the unconditional surrender of all Japanese armed forces and to provide proper and adequate assurance of their good faith in such action. The alternative for Japan is prompt and utter destruction." What happened next is almost impossible to believe. So, to avoid looking like a conspiracy theorist, here. This is a declassified article from the National Security Agency, and I will now quote a long but incredibly important excerpt from it. Reporters in Tokyo questioned Japanese Premier Kantaro Suzuki about his government's reaction to the Potsdam Declaration. Since no formal decision had been reached at the time, Suzuki, falling back on the politician's old standby, answer to reporters replied that he was withholding comment. He used the Japanese word Mokusatsu, derived from the word for silence. However, the word has other meanings quite different from that intended by Suzuki. Alas, international news agencies saw fit to tell the world that in the eyes of the Japanese government, the ultimatum was not worthy of comment. US officials, angered by the tone of Suzuki's statement and obviously seeing it as another typical example of the fanatical banzai and kamikaze spirit, decided on stern measures. Within 10 days, the decision was made to drop the atomic bomb. The bomb was dropped and Hiroshima was leveled. This is why meaning is so important. The meaning of a single word, which was misunderstood first by the translator and then by the Allies, led to the first nuclear bombing in the world and the deaths of 150 to 200,000 people. But do not rush to make far-reaching conclusions. One must be very naive to believe that Truman and Stalin were deceived by an ordinary translator, especially since Suzuki's comment did not consist of a single word. Here are 3 post-war versions of the translation of the most important fragment of his response. No matter how you read it, you won't find words like "we accept unconditional surrender and commit to fulfilling all demands." However, In all three versions, you can easily see phrases like "continue our bitter fight to the end." The myth that the word
Mokusatsu
was the trigger for the nuclear bombing in 1950 was started by Kazuo Kawai, a professor of Far Eastern history at Stanford University. Boris Naumishin, PhD at New Bulgarian University, in his review of the situation writes, "To support this myth, the third revised edition of the Kinkyusha's New Japanese English Dictionary added a new meaning of Mokusatsu as remain in wise and masterly inactivity." In 2018, an interpretation was proposed that Mokusatsu, in the response of Kantaro Suzuki, conveyed to Harry Truman as silent contempt, was actually intended as "no comment, we need more time." The only problem is that all these manipulations are only possible out of context. The overwhelming majority of those who learn about this story blame the translator. The author of the National Security Agency article blames the Japanese Prime Minister himself. Professor Kawai, who launched this beautiful fake, blamed the Russians for their failure to inform their Western allies of Japan's readiness to surrender. But what does this story actually teach us? I would highlight two key meanings. The meaning of a single word can be extremely important, even if Hiroshima was not bombed because of it. Remember the most famous example of flash fiction in the world: "For sale, baby shoes, never worn." One word can change the meaning of the narrative completely. And secondly, even the most resonant and well-studied events in world history will inevitably be distorted by someone. To shift the focus from politics to linguistics or to present black as white, stories like Mokusatsu have the potential to change the entire history of relations between the USA and Japan over the past 80 years. Do not give in. Go deep as far as you can until you hit the truth. And always seek meaning, everywhere and in everything.